Wow, this is kind of amazing, but you know what? Maybe it shouldn't surprise us. This is a new poll that just came out showing Donald Trump is succeeding with a group that, well, you might not have thought he'd really succeed with. Certainly not at this level. I'll tell you, it's got to make the Democrats really, really, really nervous. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. I am Trish Regan. Portions of the show are, as always, brought to you by Legacy, pminvestments.com. To learn more about investing in gold or silver, go over to LegacyPMInvestments.com. 1-866-589-0560 is the number if you want to give them a ring. 1-866-589-0560. We're going to talk about gold in just a little bit because if you've been watching it, it has been doing very well. But first, the news of the day here. Donald Trump's YouGov rating. Wow, this is just amazing. It shows that among millennials, generally those born between the years 1981 and 1996, is at 47%. That's really high because it's actually higher than Gen X, where Trump is popular among 37%, and baby boomers, where he also has 37%. So he's polling highest among millennials. And this is the group, that Joe Biden so desperately wants. This is the group that they keep trying to appeal to with all their sort of extremist nonsense. And it's not working. But why should it be working? I mean, think about where our economy is. Think about where gas prices are heading. Think about if you're a millennial, you're trying to, maybe start a family or maybe buy a house. The cards are kind of right now, economically speaking, really stacked against you. So as much as they want to push all the things that they like to push, from transgender stuff to green energy stuff to, let's have one big open country and no borders stuff, as much as they think that that's going to succeed with millennials, it's not. People just kind of want to be able to take care of themselves and take care of their families. And that's why policies matter. I'm telling you, policy matters. Do the Democrats want to have a repeat of 2020? Maybe they do. Maybe that's the idea here, because I think you're seeing a lot of consolidation in terms of support for Donald Trump right now as a result of what we had transpire with the arraignment, et cetera. I think that a lot of people that maybe had kind of said, okay, enough after January 6th are like, but wait a second, now it's getting really crazy. And they don't like the idea of these things becoming so politicized. Well, joining me here today on the program, I'm so happy to have with me Representative Byron Donalds from Florida. This is the guy, by the way, this is the guy that many thought might, if Kevin McCarthy hadn't gotten speaker, might have taken over as Speaker of the House. So big political future perhaps ahead for Byron Donalds. He joins me right now with more on Donald Trump and the overall economy. Welcome to the program, sir. Good to have you.
It's good to see you. Good to be with you.
So I'm going to get to the finance stuff in a second because I'm blown away. I very rarely get to meet anybody in Congress that actually has a background in business and finance. And I know you were a financial advisor before you came to Congress. So we are looking forward to talking to you about that. But real quick, first of all, your reaction to what just happened there with the former president of the United States being arraigned, now facing all of these charges. Any thoughts?
It's just bogus. It's foolishness. It's frankly, it's reckless. The president's just being put up here because it's political and they just want to get Trump. And it's really unfortunate. I've been saying a lot. You can be for President Trump or against President Trump. Those are matters of politics. Americans, we're allowed to have those disagreements. But when you use the criminal justice system like this to get your political opponent, that's when you really degrade what American values are supposed to be, what American justice is supposed to be. It makes us look foolish on the world stage, and it's really destructive internally of our country and of our political system.
I kind of feel like it's exactly what China and Russia want, if you think about it, to your point about the world stage. So we look foolish. Do you think a genie's been let out of the bottle, so to speak, in this one? I mean, what's to stop any DA anywhere in the country from going after anyone on a national level?
I think it has, and I think that genie's out of the bottle. And what it's going to take is serious people on both sides of the aisle to put it back. Look, it's important to state nobody is above the law. Nobody. But we've also seen in the history of the country that presidents and former high-level officials have been quote unquote let off the hook because prosecutors or DAs thought it would be very damaging. I mean, look, Bill Clinton, he perjured himself in front of a grand jury. They didn't bring charges on him to indict him. They took his law license so he couldn't practice law. That's what they did. James Comey famously said, no reasonable prosecutor would try to indict Hillary Clinton on the Espionage Act, even though she violated it. That's what he said. I'm assuming James Comey thinks that Alvin Bragg is a reasonable prosecutor, because what they're going after here are bookmaking irregularities based upon a federal crime that doesn't exist, because the federal agencies who have jurisdiction never pursued a crime and actually said there's nothing to see here. And to be specific on that, the Federal Election Commission actually heard this. They went through this matter and they voted 4-1 not to go after and move forward with charges or a fine or anything like that. And if you get a 4-1 vote on the FEC, what it means is that you had Republicans and Democrats agree that this is not something to pursue.
So in other words, politics on steroids
100%.
With a dangerous precedent. Let me turn to what's going on in the financial markets. Look, I mean, the Fed is printing again. They were supposed to be tightening. I know that you are on the Financial Services Committee. Walk me through what's happening as we look towards finding some solution here on our debt and deficits, because as far as the eye can see, it's not looking good.
Well, first with the Fed, this new discount window that they used to help bank balance sheets, by what I've been able to grasp and understand, is that banks have been going out and borrowing this money from the Fed. Well, the Fed just doesn't get that money from anywhere. They got to try to find a way to create it in order to lend it to the banks. And I think that's what Art Laffer's talking about there with this new liquidity that's now coming into the system. That's number one. Number two, Washington has actually made matters worse with the massive overspending in response to COVID-19. And I know at the time people were concerned about our economy, the CARES Act, et cetera. But the stuff that Joe Biden did, the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, or like I like to call it, the Green New Deal's little brother, because that's really what the bill is. All those spending items that they did and they put together, all that did was inject massive amounts of fiscal stimulus into an economy that didn't need it. Our economy in 2021 was already ready to get back on it because states were beginning to reopen. People were going back to work. People had money in their bank accounts because of COVID stimulus through the CARES Act. And there was pent up demand for people just to travel, live life again. All these things were going to happen. And then we dumped in another $2.5 trillion of federal spending. I think the Federal Reserve saw this and they said, well, you know what? Let's start to tighten our balance sheet, which, by the way, they should. And they just need to do it quickly. Because if you take a longer run view, since the financial collapse back in 2008, the Fed's balance sheet went from $900 billion to $9 trillion. They left rates at basically zero. Yeah, I mean, so we've had cheap money for 14 years, a massive Fed balance sheet. The world shuts down. You do the CARES Act money, bipartisan. I think people largely agreed with it. And because you had no economic activity, there was needed an injection to kind of keep things stabilized.
Sure, at that time. But then to your point, at some point, the world reopened. They had vaccines out there. People had the ability to go back to work, but they were incentivized in some ways not to. There was so much money just sort of flowing through the system. And to your point, pent up demand. It was driving me crazy at the time, Congressman, because I actually called major inflation. I said, we're going to be looking at double digits, which we did get on the producer price index. I said that in August of 2020. And this was when President Trump came out with his second stimulus check. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. You can't have both of these guys working together, the Fed and, you can't have the fiscal and monetary policy simultaneously. And then sure enough, Joe Biden comes in, he issues another check. And then to your point, comes up with multiple programs, including the Inflation Reduction Act, which I love that title. It just kind of cracks me up, which just created more and more inflation. Now we got OPEC cutting. Unexpectedly, oil prices are moving up. So we'll probably get more inflation along with, whatever quantitative easing the Fed needs to do to save us from this banking crisis. This is like one big mess.
There's another one of the big reasons for that is we're 31.5 trillion in debt. We still haven't figured out our debt ceiling fights on Capitol Hill. If I was an investor and I'm looking for a safe haven, do I want U.S. Treasuries or do I want gold? Well, I'm going to gold because I got to go somewhere.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting to me. That's interesting. You actually feel like gold is safer than treasuries right now?
I think there's some merit to it because if you look at what the president's budget proposal is, and his budget's dead on arrival, but his budget proposal would have us move to $52 trillion in debt over a decade. At some point, even America, as strong as our economy is, as dynamic as it is, at some point we're going to struggle with repaying, forget the debt itself, the interest. We're estimating that interest payments, CBO's estimates, are $1.5 trillion by 2033. That's more than we spend on the military today. It's more than we spend on domestic programs today. That would just go to paying interest on the debt. And if you have us having to spend so much money just to make interest payments to the bond markets, it squeezes out so many other things in our economy. That would actually be really, it would be problematic for our nation. And so then what happens to the rating of our treasury bonds? That's why I would say if you're looking super long term, 25-year outlook, 20-year outlook, maybe gold is better than treasuries.
No, I hear you on that long-term scenario because the long-term fundamentals are really scary. Do you think that the U.S. could be one day looking at defaulting on its debt? I hate to even say it.
I think in the short term, no, we're going to get this thing worked out. I mean, Republicans, and I'm a Freedom Caucus member, we are having many discussions right now, and nobody in our conference has said anything close to, we're going to not extend the debt ceiling. Because we're not even in that conversation. We know we're going to extend it. What we're trying to do is make sure that we have substantial cuts to federal spending, in year one. I mean, we just say, let's go back to pre-COVID spending levels. That just makes sense since the pandemic is over. Let's do that. That saves about 2.5 to 3 trillion over a 10-year window. And then let's continue to do the other work to get our budget in line. The problem is Joe Biden doesn't want to negotiate. And, people say, well, you guys got to try to come to terms with him or do a clean debt ceiling. Well, Joe Biden could have had his clean debt ceiling. He could have done it when Nancy Pelosi was speaker. He chose not to. He chose to have a political fight right now. And we're not going to play that game. So I anticipate we're going to do our work. We're going to continue to do it and try to get that done. I think longer term, in terms of defaulting on the debt, if you read any report, Moody's, S&P, whatever, they talk about Congress's ability to extend the debt ceiling, but they also talk about Congress's ability to be financially responsible long term. And so I do think that cooler heads are going to prevail. I think probably with different presidential leadership, cooler heads are going to prevail. We're going to get the fiscal house of the nation back in order so that our engine, our economy, the thing that makes everything else go, can hum and thrive, be the dominant economy in the world on a continuing basis, and Americans can succeed.
That's what we need. Congressman, you have just an interesting background. Before I let you go, I just want to, you grew up in New York, in Brooklyn, I understand. You're one of the few people, as I said, when we went into this interview, that have a background in finance, which I think is pretty needed and critical there in Washington, D.C. You live in Florida now. Just tell us a little bit about you and your upbringing and how you wound up on this path into politics. I have tremendous admiration for anybody who's willing to go that route because it's not an easy one and you get a lot of daggers thrown at you all the time.
Well, I mean, I grew up a city kid, Crown Heights, Brooklyn. It was just me and my mom. She struggled. She was poor. There was a time, we were on food stamps and WIC and stuff like that. But my mother, for her, education was everything. That was going to be the thing that would get me out of the inner city. So, she's a tough lady. She was on my case all the time about my schoolwork, my academics. I took an investment course in high school. I thought it was pretty cool. And it was an elective and it was pretty cool. So I was like, well, I like money and I like math. I think I could do this. Majored in it in college. Didn't go back to New York because it was post 9/11 when I graduated. And I came down here to Naples and just started my career, banking, insurance, financial services. And, the thing that really got me into politics was watching the financial collapse as a professional and turning on the House Financial Services Committee and seeing members of Congress not know what they were talking about. It really just pissed me off. And so I just started getting interested in politics and, the rest is history.
Kind of Pissed me off too as I watched that on the front lines reporting on it. I can remember some members of Congress not being able to tell the difference between who was Treasury Secretary, who was head of the Federal Reserve. So you got interested in high school. How do we get more kids?
That's a good one. I think there's been a real push lately to have financial literacy be a part of requirements for high school graduation. I was in the state legislature for a couple years, and I would tell my colleagues, like I got no problem with English all 4 years, but
By the
truth
way,
be
it's not
told, if you
Othello
don't
and
know how to
Macbeth
balance a
anymore.
checkbook
It's
and
a
understand
whole other
interest
set
rates,
of books,
you're going to
as you
cause
know.
far more damage to yourself than doing high level papers on Othello and Macbeth. That's just the way it is, And that's not against Shakespeare. That's just understanding the realities of the world today. Yeah, that's true. But I think for me, I cared more about just being a city kid. I cared about just making money and trying to find ways to not struggle like how my mom struggled. And then through my own understanding of economics and really being focused on economics, when I started paying attention to politics, I didn't look at it, and still really don't, like a Republican Democrat thing. I look at it in terms of what provides economic growth, what allows people to succeed, and whatever those policies are, I'm for that. Everything else is a circus.
I think you and I are simpatico in that way. And I always say, look, JFK cut taxes.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. Economics does not have to be so partisan. Let's just do what we can to grow the economy for everyone, therefore to provide more opportunity for everyone. Can't guarantee the outcome, but let's make sure that we do our best to provide the opportunity. Look, it is a pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Good luck there. Keep up the good fight to try and get this budget somewhat in order. And we'll talk to you again very soon, I hope.
Oh, of course. Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Congressman Donalds, thank you. You heard Representative Donalds talking about gold versus treasuries and everything. I will say once again, I am no one's financial advisor. I am just an opinionated journalist who happens to know a few things about the economy and has spent most of her career on the front lines of watching our markets and watching all of this economic data. And so I preface what I'm about to say, because it's from an advertiser, with that information, in that you always need to make your own investment decisions, and you always need to be very secure and very safe in how you approach those things. Anyway, if you're interested in investing in gold, I would encourage you to call our advertiser, Legacy PM Investments. LegacyPMInvestments.com is the name of the company. You can buy gold directly from them, or silver. This is, we're not excluding anything here. Gold directly through them online or by calling their number. You can get some advice from them by calling the number at 1-866-589-0560. Again, 1-866-589-0560. They have been a sponsor from the very beginning of this show. Charles Thorngren, he was just on the program quite recently before this big run up in gold, predicting that we'd probably see some higher prices this year. I mean, look, I would not have anticipated this. I don't think he anticipated this, what we saw most recently in terms of that big gold spike. But as we head into these challenging times and we're faced with this debt ceiling and everybody's arguing and you got a former president being arraigned, all of this weighs on sentiment, and it weighs on sort of the overall standing, if you would, of how the U.S. is viewed in the world. And so that's why some people really tend to flock towards something like gold in that environment. So if you're one of them, go give them a ring. 1-866-589-0560. Again, 1-866-589-0560. I do also want to give a quick shout out. You know, I do this every single day, my dog, because my dog is very important, very special to me. That would be Fluffy. And it's one of the reasons why I teamed up with this advertiser, Rough Greens, to help promote health for dogs all over the country. You can get a free jumpstart trial of naturopathic Dr. Dennis Black's Rough Greens. This is for your dog. It's kind of like a vitamin supplement. We take our vitamins. Maybe our dogs need theirs as well. You can take that just by giving it. You can give it to your dog, rather, not you take it. Although sometimes when you look at the ingredients, I'm like, that looks pretty darn good. There is a different standard, however, so don't try that at home. It is for your dog, and you can sprinkle it on top of your dog's food. I give it to Fluffy once a day, and I love knowing that he's getting the nutrients that he so needs for a long, healthy, happy life, the digestive enzymes, the amino acids, all the right vitamins, the proteins, all those things that he needs. Dr. Black has put it in there. So go check it out. You can get your free Jumpstart trial in just a couple of days, actually. Just pay for shipping by going to roughgreens.com/Trish. It's spelled RUFF. You get it. roughgreens.com/Trish. Listen, we got a big week ahead here. We are not going to stop. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. I certainly hope you had a wonderful Easter. But we've got so much news coming our way. Things bubbling up on the international front, a lot of fears about China right now. We've spoken at length about this, of course, and you understand my concerns about China and Russia teaming up. There's talk now of Brazil as well. This would not be a very good situation for the U.S. It is important that we protect our hegemonic power, because that's what gives us some of our financial strength. So listen, financial strength, military strength, these are things that go hand in hand, and you have to have them together. So let's not let that go. Make sure you go over to my website, trishreganshow.com, trishreganshow.com. Sign up for my free newsletter, and I'll see you tomorrow.